Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Before we get started, do us a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future deep dives. Today we're tackling something that's super relevant, whether you're a UPSC aspirant gearing up for those exams, a student diving into the world of governance, or just a citizen curious about how things work. Social audit.
Ooh, I like that. Social audit.
Now, I know social audit might sound a bit technical,
Ugh.
maybe even a little dry,
Yeah.
but trust me, as anything but.
Yeah.
Think of it like this. Imagine you're chipping in for a neighborhood project,
Okay.
like a new park.
Uh-huh.
Wouldn't you want to know exactly where your money's going, how the project's progressing, and whether it's actually benefiting everyone?
100%.
That's exactly what social audit is all about. Holding the powers that be accountable for how they use public resources.
That's a great way to put it. It's about transparency, ensuring that everything's out in the open and making sure that those in charge are answerable for their actions. And it's especially relevant in a country like India, where we're striving for good governance and equitable development.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating how social audit is woven into the fabric of our democracy. We're not just talking about some abstract concept here. It's enshrined in our Constitution,
Right.
particularly through the 73rd Amendment,
Hmm.
which really empowered local governance through institutions like the Gram Sabha.
Precisely. The 73rd Amendment was a game changer. It decentralized power, giving communities a greater say in local development. And social audit plays a crucial role in ensuring that this power is used responsibly and effectively.
Okay, so we've got the big picture, but let's break it down a little bit.
Yeah.
For those hearing about social audit for the first time, what exactly does it entail?
At its core, a social audit is a systematic process where the public scrutinizes how public resources are used for development initiatives. It's about examining whether projects are meeting their intended goals, whether funds are being utilized properly, and most importantly, whether the intended beneficiaries are actually benefiting.
So it's not just about number crunching. It's about listening to the voices of the people, understanding their experiences, and making sure their needs are being met.
Exactly. And that's where some of the key principles of social audit come into play. For example, one crucial principle is multi-perspective, meaning that the audit takes into account the views of all stakeholders, not just a select few. Imagine a project aimed at improving healthcare in a rural area.
Okay.
A multi-perspective approach would involve gathering input not just from government officials and healthcare providers, but also from the villagers themselves, understanding their specific needs and challenges.
That makes so much sense. It's about ensuring that development is truly inclusive and responsive to the needs of the people it's meant to serve. Another principle that jumps out at me is disclosed. Why is transparency such a cornerstone of social audit?
Transparency is essential for accountability.
Yeah.
Think about it. If the findings of a social audit are kept under wraps, how can they be used to hold anyone responsible or drive improvements? By making the results public, we create a system where everyone, the community, the media, civil society organizations can see how things are being managed. That public scrutiny acts as a powerful deterrent against corruption and encourages better decision-making.
It's like shining a light on the entire process, making sure everything's above board. Now let's dive into why this all matters, especially for our UPSC aspirants who need to understand the significance of social audit in the context of good governance.
Sure. One of the most crucial aspects is how social audit strengthens the Gram Sabha, which is the assembly of villagers at the grassroots level. The Gram Sabha is where decisions about local development are made, and social audit gives villagers a powerful tool to hold their elected representatives accountable for those decisions. It ensures that the Gram Sabha isn't just a rubber stamp, but a platform for genuine community participation.
So it's not just a theoretical concept. It has real teeth, allowing communities to have a say in how their lives are shaped.
Absolutely. And that's incredibly empowering, not just at the village level, but for our democracy as a whole. When citizens are actively involved in holding power accountable, it strengthens the very foundations of our governance system.
And the impact goes beyond just empowering communities. Our source material highlights how social audit can actually lead to improved professionalism within government bodies themselves. How does that work?
That's right. When officials know they're being watched, so to speak, they're more likely to maintain proper records, adhere to procedures, and be more diligent in using public funds. This in turn leads to better service delivery, fewer delays, and less wastage.
So it's a win-win situation. It empowers citizens and encourages those in positions of authority to be more accountable and efficient. But we have to be realistic, right? Social audit isn't a magic wand that fixes everything overnight. Our source material does mention some limitations. What are some of the challenges that social audits face on the ground?
One major obstacle is inconsistency in implementation. Ideally, social audits should be a regular integrated part of governance, but often they're conducted on an ad hoc basis, which can limit their effectiveness.
And there's also the issue of expertise, right? It takes a particular set of skills to conduct a thorough and impartial social audit.
Exactly. Finding qualified auditors who understand the nuances of the process and can navigate complex situations can be a real bottleneck. And even when audits are conducted effectively, there's the question of enforcement. What happens if the recommendations are simply ignored?
That's a critical point. The findings need to have teeth. There needs to be a mechanism to ensure that the identified issues are addressed and that those responsible are held accountable.
Absolutely. We need strong legal frameworks and institutional mechanisms to back up the social audit process and ensure that it leads to real, tangible change.
This is all incredibly insightful, but we've covered a lot of ground. Perhaps you can help us recap the key takeaways for our listeners before we move on to part 2 of this deep dive.
Of course. We began by defining social audit as a process of public scrutiny to ensure transparency and accountability in how public resources are used for development. Then we discussed the key principles that underpin social audit, emphasizing the importance of multiple perspectives, transparency, and community participation. We saw how social audit empowers the Gram Sabha, making it a powerful tool for local governance.
And we didn't shy away from the challenges either. We discussed the limitations of sporadic implementation, the need for qualified auditors, and the importance of strong enforcement mechanisms to ensure that the findings of social audits lead to real action.
But despite these challenges, the potential impact of social audit is undeniable. It empowers communities, improves the professionalism of public bodies, and ultimately strengthens our democracy by promoting transparency and accountability.
This has been a fantastic overview, but there's so much more to explore. Join us in part 2, where we'll continue our deep dive into social audit, examining the practical aspects of how it's actually conducted.
Welcome back to our deep dive into social audits. In part 1, we laid the groundwork exploring the definition, principles, and significance of this powerful tool for good governance. We also touched upon some of the challenges and limitations that we need to be aware of.
Absolutely. We saw how social audit can be a game changer, but it's not a walk in the park to implement effectively.
Yeah.
Now, in part 2, I'm really keen to get into the nitty-gritty. How does this all actually work on the ground? What are the steps involved in conducting a social audit? I know our listeners, especially those UPSC aspirants prepping for those tough exams, are eager to understand the process.
You're right. Understanding the practical aspects is crucial. It's not enough to know the theory. You need to see how it plays out in the real world. Our source material mentions something called the social audit cycle, which outlines the key steps involved.
Okay, cool. Let's unpack that. What's the first step in this cycle?
So the first step is identify indicators of performance. It sounds technical, but it's actually quite straightforward. It's about setting clear benchmarks for what success looks like. For example, let's say we're auditing a program that aims to provide clean drinking water to rural communities.
Okay.
We need to establish specific indicators like the number of wells constructed, the percentage of households with access to clean water, and the improvement in water quality. These indicators give us a framework for measuring the effectiveness of the program.
So it's like setting targets and then measuring progress against those targets. Makes sense. What's the next step?
Step 2 is collect data, both quantitative and qualitative. This is where we gather evidence to see how the program is performing against those indicators we just talked about. Quantitative data, like the number of wells constructed, give us a hard measure of progress. But qualitative data, which involves gathering people's stories and experiences, gives us a deeper understanding of the program's real impact. Are the wells functioning properly? Is the water actually clean? Are people satisfied with the program?
That's so important. It's not just about ticking boxes. It's about understanding the lived experiences of the people the program is supposed to benefit.
Exactly. And this is where the participatory nature of social audits really shines. Gathering qualitative data often involves conducting interviews, focus groups, and community meetings, giving people a voice, and ensuring that their perspectives are captured.
I can see how this would be particularly relevant for UPSC aspirants who need to demonstrate a deep understanding of grassroots governance. What comes after the data collection phase?
The next step is evaluate data internal and external comparison. This is where we analyze the data we've collected and assess the program's performance against those indicators we set earlier. We compare the program's achievements with its own targets and with similar programs in other areas.
So it's about benchmarking and seeing where the program stands both internally and in comparison to others. This is starting to sound a lot like the kind of analysis UPSC expects from its candidates. What's the final step in this cycle?
The final step, and arguably the most crucial, is publish social audit reports. This is where transparency really comes into play. By making the reports public, we ensure that the findings are accessible to everyone, the community government officials, the media, everyone. This public scrutiny is what drives accountability and positive change.
It creates a system where everyone can see what's working, what's not, and hold those responsible accountable for the outcomes. Now let's talk about the people involved in this process. Our source material mentions something called social audit units, or SAUs. What exactly are these?
SAUs are independent bodies typically set up at the state level that are responsible for facilitating and overseeing social audits. They provide training to auditors, develop methodologies, and ensure that audits are conducted in a fair and transparent manner.
So they're like the guardians of the process, making sure everything is done by the book.
That's a good way to put it. They play a vital role in maintaining the integrity and credibility of social audits.
And of course, we can't talk about social audit without mentioning the Gram Saba, which we discussed earlier. What's their role in this process?
The Gram Saba is where the rubber meets the road. It's the platform where the community comes together to review the findings of the audit, discuss the program's performance, and hold their elected representatives accountable. This is where citizens can truly exercise their power and ensure that development projects are responsive to their needs.
It sounds like a powerful mechanism for direct democracy at the grassroots level.
It truly is. And for our UPSC aspirants, understanding the dynamics of the Gram Saba and its role in social audit is crucial. It often features prominently in the exam, especially in the governance section.
Okay, we've got a good grasp of the steps and the key players. But as we discussed earlier, social audit faces real-world challenges. Let's dive deeper into some of those hurdles. We talked about the lack of trained auditors. How can we address this bottleneck?
Well, investing in capacity building is key. We need dedicated training programs, certification courses, and partnerships with educational institutions to create a pool of qualified auditors. Imagine a specialized social audit curriculum integrated into public administration courses. That could really make a difference.
That's a fantastic idea. Equipping aspiring bureaucrats with those skills would be a game changer. What about ensuring the independence of those social audit units, the SAUs? We talked about how their reliance on project implementing agencies for funding can compromise their impartiality.
That's a critical point. We need to explore alternative funding mechanisms for SAUs, such as dedicated social audit funds, grants from independent sources, or even innovative models like crowdfunding. We need to guarantee that they can operate without fear or favor, providing honest assessments.
It's about ensuring that the watchdog isn't influenced by the very people it's meant to be watching. And then there's the issue of enforcement. What's the point of all this effort if the recommendations are simply ignored?
You're absolutely right. We need to strengthen legal frameworks and institutional mechanisms to ensure that government agencies are obligated to respond to the findings of social audits and take concrete action based on the recommendations. Perhaps a system where audit reports are tabled in the legislature and debated openly with clear timelines for implementation.
That would create real pressure for action and ensure that the findings aren't simply swept under the rug. Now, before we move on to part 3, where we'll explore the broader implications of social audit, I want to bring it back to our listeners. How can social audit empower individuals in their everyday lives? What's in it for them?
That's a great question. Social audit empowers citizens by giving them a voice in how public resources are used and how services are delivered. It provides a platform for raising concerns, demanding accountability, and pushing for better outcomes. Imagine being able to directly question officials about a delayed school construction project or hold them accountable for poor quality healthcare services. That's real power.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've spent the last 2 parts really getting into the nuts and bolts of social audit, what it is, how it works, and even the hurdles it faces. But now for this final part, I want to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. We've touched on how social audit can empower communities and make government more accountable. But what's its true potential? Can it really transform governance, not just fix individual projects?
That's the million-dollar question. And I do think the answer is yes. Social audit has that potential to fundamentally shift how we view governance.
Okay.
It's about moving away from a top-down approach, where decisions are made in those distant offices,
Right.
and embracing a more participatory model where citizens have a real say in shaping their own destiny.
It's like democratizing development, putting power back into the hands of the people. And I can see how this resonates deeply with our UPSC aspirants who are studying how to make governance more effective and inclusive.
Absolutely. For aspiring civil servants, understanding that transformative power of social audit is crucial. Imagine a future where policies aren't just formulated in ivory towers, but are shaped by the lived experiences and needs of the people they're meant to serve.
Yeah.
That's the kind of change social audit can bring about.
It's about creating a system where citizens are not just passive recipients of services, but active participants in shaping those services. And we've talked about how social audit can improve the professionalism of public bodies, but I'd love to delve deeper into that. How does this actually play out in practice?
Okay, so imagine a scenario where officials know that their decisions and actions are going to be scrutinized by the very people they're supposed to serve.
Okay. Yeah.
That awareness alone is a powerful motivator to be more diligent, to adhere to ethical standards, to use funds responsibly. It's about creating a culture of transparency where cutting corners or acting in self-interest is simply not an option.
It's like having a built-in accountability mechanism that encourages everyone to be at their best. And this shift in mindset, I imagine, can have ripple effects far beyond individual projects or departments.
Exactly. When you have a system where transparency and accountability are the norm, it fosters trust between citizens and the government. People become more engaged in civic processes, they feel more confident in holding their leaders accountable, and they're more likely to participate in development initiatives.
It's like a virtuous cycle, creating a more responsive and participatory democracy. Now, I know we've painted a pretty optimistic picture, but let's be real. Can social audit really live up to these lofty expectations? Are there systemic challenges that might hold it back?
Well, you're right, it's not a magic bullet. Deeply ingrained power structures and mindsets can be resistant to change. One challenge is overcoming the reluctance of some officials to embrace transparency. They might see it as a threat to their authority or an added burden on their already overloaded plates.
And we've also talked about the need for capacity building. Having enough skilled auditors and robust social audit units is crucial, but building that capacity takes time, resources, and political will.
Absolutely. We need sustained investment in training and strengthening institutions and creating a conducive environment for social audit to flourish. It's a long-term process that requires commitment from all stakeholders.
And what about the role of the media and civil society organizations? They can play a huge role in amplifying the voices of communities and holding power to account, right?
Oh, absolutely. A vibrant media that sheds light on issues and a strong civil society that advocates for transparency are crucial for social audit to be truly effective. It's about creating an ecosystem where everyone understands the value of holding power accountable and participates in making it happen.
This has been a fantastic deep dive exploring not just the mechanics of social audit, but also its profound potential to reshape governance and empower citizens. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We've talked about governments, institutions, experts. But what about the role of individuals? How can each of us contribute to making social audit more effective in our own communities?
You know, that's a really important question. Social audit is not just a process, it's a movement. It's about citizens reclaiming their right to hold power accountable and demanding a more just and equitable society.
Yeah.
We can all play a role, whether it's attending Gram Sabha meetings, raising our voices when we see something wrong, or supporting organizations that champion transparency and good governance. Remember, change starts with each of us.
That's a powerful message to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of social audit. We hope it's equipped you with a deeper understanding of this vital tool for good governance and inspired you to become active participants in shaping a more just and accountable society. Don't forget to check out the show notes for additional resources, and until next time, happy deep diving.